Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show, a program exclusively designed to promote reproductive health awareness and discuss fertility preservation options. Here is your host, the Harvard-educated fertility specialist, Dr. Amy.
She's known as the Egg Whisperer.
Fertility expert Dr. Amy Vazadeh.
And you have yet another success story
just launched by an East Bay fertility doctor.
Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show. You guys, I have the fertility world's version of Oprah on today's show. I mean, she's more famous than Oprah to us fertility docs and fertility patients. And that is speaking the truth. Welcome, Dr. Ali Domar, to the Egg Whisperer Show. Thank you, Ali, for coming back on today.
Oh, it's my pleasure.
So for those of you who are joining our show and maybe just don't know about Ali, well, you're going to hear a little bit more right now as I read her bio. So she's the Executive Director of the Domar Centers for MindBody Health and the Director of Integrative Care at Boston IVF. She's an Associate Professor of Obstetrics, Gynecology, and Reproductive Biology, part-time at Harvard Medical School. She established the first ever MindBody Center for Women's Health, as well as the very first MindBody program for fertility. In 1987, Dr. Domar began exploring the impact of psychological distress on fertility, culminating in her MindBody program, which teaches women strategies to reduce anxiety, depression, and distress through relaxation, mindfulness, cognitive restructuring, and yoga. Research continues to show that MindBody infertility programs not only improve psychological symptoms, but also increase pregnancy rates. Her latest project is the release earlier this week of the redesigned mobile app FertiCalm, or actually I should say FertiCon, which contains more than 500 solutions to the events and situations most likely to cause distress for anyone experiencing infertility. And I honestly have the app myself and I love it. You know, some of the stuff just cracks me up because it just turns sometimes serious situations into like something that you can deal with a little bit better. So Ali, thank you again for coming on.
Well, you and I have known each other for a long time, since you were in med school.
And we have so much to talk about. And before we get into some of the new things, let's do a quick overview of the basis of your amazing work. Tell us a bit about the mind-body connection and how it impacts fertility and your work in this field.
It's funny, I was just writing a thing in rebuttal to someone who wrote about stress and infertility, and I realized that my interest in the field came before I was born, because it took my parents, I think it was 7 years to conceive my sister. And the reason my mom attributed to getting pregnant was they gave her the 1950s version of Valium. And she took whatever it was in those days, and boom, came my sister. And then I came 5 years later. But in my family, growing up, it always like, oh yeah, stress causes infertility because my mom took Valium and got pregnant. So I think I've always been interested in the stress-fertility connection. And then I got my PhD in health psychology and majored in OBGYN. And it just felt like an unanswered question. You know, does stress cause infertility, or does infertility cause stress? And so I'm a dinosaur. I've been doing this for 34 years now.
Great. And so what is the answer? I'm like,
so the answer is infertility causes a huge amount of stress. I mean, I published a paper back in 20, 25 years ago that showed that women with infertility had the same level of anxiety and depression as did women with cancer, AIDS, or heart disease. So that was like, it confirmed everything that I knew from talking to patients every day, but it was a really good thing for my patients to tell their bosses and their mothers-in-law and everyone else to say, see, this is really bad. And then last spring, some of our fellows and I decided to do a study to look at the psychological impact of COVID on our patients. And, you know, it was me and a group of male physicians. And we started off with me saying, for our patients, even during the surge in Boston, and Boston had a really bad surge last spring, infertility is going to be worse. And everyone's like, oh, there's no way. COVID's so stressful. We're all, locked up. It's a pandemic. I'm like, no, I think for our patients, infertility will be worse. And I was right. We just published the paper that for our patients, infertility is so hard that even a global pandemic doesn't outdo the impact. And, if you think about it, infertility is unlike any other disease. And I use the word disease deliberately because the World Health Organization has classified infertility as a disease. It affects your relationship with your partner. It affects your sex life. It affects your relationship with your family and your friends and your job and your financial security and your relationship with God and your sense of being a female person or a male person and self-esteem. And on top of all of it, you're blamed. Just think of what every patient in the world is told, just relax and you'll get pregnant. Would you ever say that to a cancer patient? Oh, just relax and your cancer will go away. No. So it's so clear that infertility causes a very high level of stress.
Yeah. And then in your research, what do you find that could be, good ways to support patients, things that could reduce stress during fertility treatment and reduce the burden of treatment for them?
So that's also what I've been spending my dinosaur years working on. We opened the MindBody program for infertility in 1987, and there have been thousands and thousands and thousands of women who've gone through it. I've trained people around the world and have now done, with the actual group program, 2 large randomized controlled trials. And we just did a trial last year on an online version. And what we found is, with a randomized controlled trial, is that women who do the MindBody program for infertility are less depressed, less anxious, less lonely. Physical symptoms get better, like insomnia gets better and headaches get better. And the pregnancy rates go up at least double. So, if everyone always says what comes first, infertility or stress, I think it's very clear that infertility causes a lot of stress. But I think what's just about as clear is if you can reduce the stress level of infertility patients, they're more likely to get pregnant.
And as a doctor, how can I do that? What kinds of things can I suggest for them?
Well, and in fact, if you look at my career and all the things that I've sort of focused on, and it used to be all about interventions and doing research and interventions and doing these large randomized controlled trials. And then I spent about 5 years trying to figure out why patients drop out of treatment. And now my entire focus is on working with physicians and nurses and support staff, this whole concept of patient-centered care. And, how can you change how the clinic is, but maybe more specifically, how can you change how we communicate with our patients? And I actually just did a study with one of our fellows on the impact of empathic communication. And we're launching a huge study for the summer on, is there a better way to break bad news to our patients, specifically a negative beta? And so, I think that I went from sort of treating one patient at a time, either individually or in a group. And now I'm at the point of, okay, how can we, this is actually what I said at the start fellows retreat last summer. I said, I want us all, everybody in our field worldwide, to stop treating patients. And I want us to start caring for patients. Because our patients are anxious and depressed and lonely, and the whole world's getting pregnant. I mean, if I hear one person say to one of my patients, one more person to say, I don't even know how it happened. It was the first month. And my patients don't need to know how easy it was to get pregnant. My patients don't need to know that, because it's like saying to somebody on the street who's homeless, oh, I just bought my 4th house. Like, why do you need to say that? I don't want to know how many times you had sex. I don't want to know what position you used, and my patients sure don't. So I think we all need to change the way we care for patients. And I think one of those is to communicate empathically, to understand where the patients are coming from. And as I said, if you look at the data in other fields, it's really easy to do. And that's what I'm focusing on now. So I'm focusing, or I've been trying to, teach providers, but I also realized a number of years ago that patients need skills. And if you train 10 therapists and 10 therapists see those patients, you're going to have a very small number of people who are learning new skills. And that's why Liz Grill and I, she's the Director of Psychological Service at Weill Cornell Medical Center. That's why we launched FertiCom a few years ago, because I've had so many patients on a Monday say, I got my period at 11 o'clock on Saturday night and I couldn't reach you. Or I was at a wedding and 3 people announced they were pregnant. Or I was home for Thanksgiving and my sister told us she was pregnant. And so our patients every single day have things which trigger them. And there are dozens and dozens of situations that just make our patients feel badly and feel stressed and anxious and alone. And the idea is there a way to basically put a therapist in your phone to, Liz and I, because we've been doing this for so long, we came up with the 50 situations which we know are the hardest. And then we have like 6 solutions for each situation.
And there's also a version for men too, isn't there?
There was, we had come up with Ferticon, and it had been licensed by Ferring Pharmaceuticals. And, 5 seconds after Ferticon came out, Ferring asked for a male version, Ferta Strong. Ferring stopped the licensure last fall because they're working on a new program called House Calls. And so Liz and I decided to invest our personal resources into revising Ferticon based on making it look better and make it easier to use and change everything to gender neutral language. I have my 20-year-old got mad at me. And the only, in fact, negative comments we've gotten is that we don't have gender neutral. So I had to pay her, I don't know, $300 to go over the entire app and make it all gender neutral language, because we don't want anyone to use the app and feel badly that we're not being inclusive. So it launched last Tuesday or Wednesday, I think.
Oh, that's so exciting. So everyone should get it. I love it. It cracks me up. I think it even helps me in terms of like being resourceful for my patients as well. So just going through the different scenarios and then seeing how you can, you answer them in a, lighthearted way just makes something that's really serious and hurtful sometimes maybe not so bad.
But I think you're talking about the social solutions where we have scripts of people saying insensitive things, because I think Liz and I have heard all the really horrible things people have said to our patients. And so we've come up with, 50 different nasty things people say, or insensitive things, or inconsiderate things. And we have scripts, what I call snappy comeback lines, to protect you. And you need to think of what your vulnerabilities are and memorize a few snappy comeback lines.
Yeah, one of my favorites that I always tell my patients, and I don't think you have this, is when your mother-in-law asks you, you'd be like, "Oh, would you like me to talk about, sex with your son?" And then maybe she won't ask you that again. So where can people download the app? Yeah, I wish to.
Yeah. I mean, just to add, it never ceases to amaze me what insensitive things people say to my patients. And I don't understand. I mean, why would someone say that? And in fact, we used to have what I called zingers as part of those scripts, but I wrote them, and they were really offensive in that, if someone says something offensive to you, I wanted to give people a chance to really zing the person back, but it didn't make it through the censors. So I tell my patients privately what the zingers would have been. So yeah, that Ferticon it's actually now called Ferticon Pro because it's a second version, and you're not allowed to change something and put it back on the App Store. So it's called Ferticon Pro, and it's on the Apple and Android stores, as I said, literally for about 3 days.
Okay, cool. Can you share some zingers with us?
Just trying to think. I wrote them so long ago, and they were rude. I think something like, I hear you're going through infertility. Do you want me to tell you, how we were successful? And I think one of the zingers was, I think we're using the right sexual positions. I mean, just, stuff that is going to make someone go away. And the zingers really were for people who you suspected weren't so kind-hearted. They were not for your 90-year-old aunt who just wants to know if you're going to be able to have a baby. They're for people where there's a little touch of competitiveness or, a need to hurt. And so they're polite answers. They're answers to educate people, and then there were the zingers. And I talk to my patients every day about coming up with their own zingers, because I think there are times where you need to zing someone right back. And, some of the worst things I hear, not just from mothers-in-law, sometimes they're from siblings. And probably on a daily basis, I say to my patients, sibling rivalry never dies.
And approval from our mother never goes away. The need to have that approval also never goes away, no matter how old your mother is.
That's right. Or if your mother's not even here. I mean, my mother died a number of years ago, and I still hear her voice about what I should or should not do.
So I want to also talk about your recent partnership with Best Shot, and you've rolled out a program that offers some support and solutions for practitioners when working with fertility patients. Can you tell us a little bit more about the Best Shot Cares program?
Yeah, so Best Shot's it's a startup out of Colorado. So Abby Mercado is the CEO. And as she very freely says, she was an IVF patient, and found it to be extremely stressful. And there were no resources where she lived. And I think I don't want to put words in her mouth, but I think she was pretty desperate to have some tools and strategies. And this, and so, Best Shot is an app, a medication app, but they've added a new arm called MindBody Fertility. And so what we're doing is we're taking the in-person MindBody program for infertility, for which we have a ton of data. And we also know, I had a grad student, Jessica Clifton, who made the MindBody program for infertility an online program. And that was actually her PhD thesis. And the online version was just as successful in terms of decreasing anxiety and depression and improving pregnancy rates. So we're making a new program called MindBody Fertility, which is a 6-session online, a virtual program. And we're working with clinics, and they're going to be offering MindBody Fertility to their patients.
And then is it open right now for people, or you have to wait for your doctor to offer it to you?
We're still, this is one of the other side effects of the pandemic, is that therapists are still flat out. I mean, I know for me, since the pandemic started, I've more than doubled my patient load. We have a waiting list at Boston IVF for people to get therapy, which I've been there almost 19 years. We've never had a waiting list before. And so we're having a harder time finding therapists who have the availability to add something. So, what we did was I went out to people who had been through the MindBody training, who tend to be more senior therapists at this point, who are also the ones who are most likely to be busy. But this time we're going to actually in the spring offer training to get newer therapists, younger therapists who may have more availability up to speed. And then the program hopefully will launch late spring, early summer.
And then how does a doctor get involved with it to, bring patients into the program?
So if a clinic wants to partner with Best Shot, because it's only going to be per clinic, they just have to go online and go to Best Shot and talk to Abby. I mean, we have now, I think, 10 clinics that are signed on and waiting for a therapist to start the program. And every time I've been speaking to a lot of infertility doctors about this, and what you're hearing over and over again is our patients are really distressed. We in our clinic don't have the resources to give them all the skills they need. The physicians and nurses are so busy. They don't have the training, they don't have the time to spend with patients. And this is a way to get a virtual, and we've been running the MindBody program virtually for a year at Boston IVF, and it's been just as successful. So we know, especially with people in their 30s and 40s, how comfortable all of us have had to be virtually. And so doing a virtual program should be just as effective. I mean, we know it's just as effective.
So you also have written one of my favorite books that I refer to every single one of my patients, and that's Finding Calm for the Expectant Mom. And my patients appreciate it so much. So if you guys are listening to this and you're hopefully going to be pregnant soon and you find yourself anxious and worried, Allie's book can really help you through this really tough time. And it seems kind of counterintuitive, right? That you would feel, you're finally there, but I find that people's anxiety is goes up. And can you just tell us a little bit about that book?
Yeah, it's funny because you'd think since I've been doing reproductive medicine for 33 years that my focus would entirely be on my patients who either have infertility or pregnancy loss. But, once a therapist establishes a relationship with a patient during infertility, you don't want them to have to leave once they get pregnant. And so, I mean, I literally am still seeing a patient, and her IVF baby, Allie, is now 17. So, I see a lot of patients through their pregnancies. And I think it would be shocking to so many people, and I don't want to offend anybody listening, that when you're going through infertility, your entire focus is that positive pregnancy test. Or if you've had a pregnancy loss, it's on that first prenatal ultrasound showing a good heartbeat and everything else. And I think people going through infertility feel that if they have a positive pregnancy test and then maybe another one 2 days later, which showed a doubling of their beta, and they have a good ultrasound, they feel then they'll be just singing on top of the roof and buying maternity clothes at 8 weeks. But at least in my experience, people get more anxious once they're pregnant. And the pregnancy, probably until they feel the baby move at about 20 weeks, that first 20 weeks can be really hard and they're also not getting, when someone's going through infertility, they're seeing you a lot. They're seeing your nurse a lot. They're in the clinic, they're getting tested, getting blood work, they're having ultrasounds. And you get constant positive feedback. but obstetricians tend to be really chill. And so a patient may be discharged from an infertility clinic at 7 weeks and may not see their OB for a month. That's a really long time. And so I wrote on Finding Calm for the Expectant Mom simply because infertility patients need something post-infertility. Because I think a lot of my patients have said they're in no man's land. So they're not infertile anymore, but they don't feel the same as somebody who got pregnant the first month they tried. You know, they tend to not tell people. They tend to be very anxious going to the bathroom. They feel superstitious and don't want to buy maternity clothes and things like that. And so, you know, I wrote the book for anyone who's pregnant, but it's really more focused on people who are highly anxious when they're pregnant.
Yeah. And for people who want to learn more about you, your practice, and buy some of your books, where can they go?
Well, I think all the books are available on Amazon, I hope, and barnesandnobles.com. I mean, the infertility book that did well, and we still use it with our patients, is called Conquering Infertility. And that has all the mind-body skills that we teach in our groups. And so if someone can't do mind-body fertility or can't do a mind-body for infertility program, Conquering Infertility, you know, it's probably half my voice and half stories from patients. We interviewed about 100 patients for the book, just so someone who's reading it can get the sense, oh my God, that sounds like me. Like I thought I was crazy, or my husband's always telling me I'm crazy, but this person sounds just like the way I'm thinking or talking. So, and I feel that's really important. It breaks my heart that, you know, my mom went through infertility in the 1950s, and it breaks my heart that people, you know, 60 something years later are still struggling the same way when they could, you know, learn skills, avail themselves of resources. There's so many things out there that can help them feel calmer, safer, and more in control.
So I mean, I literally could sit here and just listen to you talk and ask you questions all day. Like, I want to have you on the Egg Whisperer show, like, all the time. So I hope you'll come back on again.
I'm always happy to do that.
And thank you for everything that you're doing for patients and doctors. I mean, you truly single-handedly created a revolution when you started your MindBody program. And it's been, I feel really special whenever I tell someone, I know her. We're friends.
I still remember you when I first met you.
Yeah.
I think you're in med school. And you said, I want to be an infertility specialist. And I'm like, how could you know this? You're like I think we did a research study together, didn't we?
We did.
Yeah, we did. How can you know as like a second or third year med student? And you're like, nope, I want to be. And look at you now. You're one of the most famous infertility specialists in the country. So well done. Well done.
Yeah, I just love you. Thank you, Allie, for everything. You're the best.
Pleasure. Thanks for inviting me.
Welcome to the Egg Whisperer Show, a program exclusively designed to promote reproductive health awareness and discuss fertility preservation options. Here is your host, the Harvard-educated fertility specialist, Dr. Amy.
She's known as the Egg Whisperer.
Fertility expert Dr. Amy Avazadeh
And you have yet another success story.
Just launched by an East Bay fertility doctor.